The year 2025 opens on a world fractured not by ideology, but by economic warfare. A new iron curtain of tariffs and trade barriers is descending, with the United States, under President Trump, at its center, pursuing aggressive protectionism. Intended to revive American industry, these policies have instead triggered global instability and the unraveling of decades-old trade relationships. The intricate web of global commerce is being replaced by regional blocs and retaliatory measures, touching every business and consumer. Long-standing allies like the EU and Canada now find themselves targeted, forced to respond to unpredictable U.S. actions. The era of cooperative trade is fading, replaced by confrontation and economic nationalism. Tariffs meant to boost U.S. manufacturing are backfiring, raising costs for American producers and consumers alike. As nations scramble to build economic fortresses and diversify partnerships, the world faces a fundamental reordering of the global economic landscape. The global marketplace we once knew is gone, replaced by uncertainty and peril. The transatlantic partnership, once the bedrock of global stability, is now in crisis. The Trump administration's sweeping tariffs on European steel, cars, and luxury goods have shattered trust, turning allies into adversaries overnight. The EU, blindsided and angered, responded with its own targeted tariffs, signaling it would not yield to U.S. economic coercion. What were once temporary disputes now feel permanent, forcing Europe to rethink its reliance on the U.S. European leaders are now focused on building strategic autonomy, reducing dependence on an unpredictable partner. The result? A tit-for-tat cycle of retaliation, eroding a partnership that underpinned global prosperity for decades. The US and Europe, once united by open markets and shared values, are now locked in a costly economic standoff. This rift weakens their collective ability to address global challenges, from climate change to technological regulation. The bridge across the Atlantic, once a symbol of unity, is now strained to the breaking point. The world is watching as two economic giants drift further apart. Canada, facing US tariffs on steel, aluminum, and key exports, has executed a strategic pivot. Rather than a simple tit-for-tat, Canada launched a global markets initiative, fast-tracking trade deals with Asia and the EU to reduce dependence on the U.S. retaliatory tariffs targeted politically sensitive U.S. products, pressuring Congress for change. Simultaneously, Canada leveraged its critical minerals, uranium, nickel, potash, reminding Washington of its own vulnerabilities. Ottawa initiated reviews of mineral exports, subtly signaling its leverage without overt threats. As trade with the U.S. falters, Canadian exports to Europe and Asia are rising, and new investments are flowing into ports and infrastructure. Canada is forging a more independent, resilient path, turning economic adversity into opportunity. Even in the shadow of a superpower, Canada is playing its cards with strategic foresight. The numbers reveal the damage. U.S.-EU trade, once over $1.3 trillion annually, is shrinking fast. U.S. auto exports to the EU have plunged 40%. While European steel and aluminum exports to the U.S. are down over 50%. U.S.-Canada trade, once seamless, is now battered by tariffs. Canadian lumber and aluminum exports down 20%, U.S. farm exports to Canada down 25%. The North American auto industry, built on cross-border supply chains, is now mired in delays and higher costs. Aerospace, machinery, and electronics sectors are suffering as well, with partners now adversaries. The central fallacy of tariffs is exposed. In a deeply interconnected world, punishing a partner means self-inflicted harm. American businesses and consumers are paying the price through higher costs and uncertainty. The data is clear. Tariffs are making trade more expensive and dysfunctional for everyone. The trade wars have unleashed chaos across global supply chains, exposing the fragility of just-in-time manufacturing. Industries from autos to electronics face unpredictable costs and delays, undermining long-term planning and investment. An Ohio assembly plant now struggles with pricier German transmissions, Canadian tariffs, and disrupted Asian microchip supplies. Small and medium-sized businesses lacking resources to adapt are hit hardest. Some face existential threats. Companies are scrambling to reconfigure supply chains, onshoring or nearshoring production at great expense. The process is chaotic, breaking old relationships, building new factories, retraining workers. The untangling of global supply chains is the most lasting legacy of the tariff wars. The geography of manufacturing is being fundamentally reshaped. Financial markets are flashing red as trade tensions escalate. Stock indices in New York, Frankfurt, and Toronto have tumbled, especially in trade-exposed sectors. U.S. ports report double-digit drops in container traffic from Europe, signaling real economic pain. Shipping costs are volatile, adding to business uncertainty. For consumers, tariffs mean higher prices on everything from wine to lumber, fueling inflation and complicating Federal Reserve policy. The U.S. dollar has strengthened, ironically, making American exports even less competitive. Commodity prices swing wildly, and American farmers are losing export markets. The message is clear: the trade war is injecting instability and cost into the global economy. From Wall Street to Main Street, no one is immune. Canada's trump card in the trade war is its control over critical minerals, especially uranium. The U.S. relies on Canadian uranium for its nuclear power and military needs, an often overlooked vulnerability. Ottawa's National Security Review of Mineral Exports is a subtle reminder trade is a two-way street. Canada also supplies nickel, vital for electric vehicles and advanced electronics, giving it leverage in the green tech race. American automakers and tech firms now lobby for stable trade, recognizing their dependence on Canadian resources. Canada avoids overt threats, instead using quiet policy moves to highlight U.S. vulnerabilities. This resource leverage shifts the power dynamic, showing that even smaller economies can wield significant influence. Canada's strategy emphasized the need for an integrated North American resource bloc. In the 21st century, economic strength lies in securing critical supply chains, not building walls. The EU has countered U.S. tariffs with a sophisticated multi-pronged strategy. Brussels challenged the tariffs at the WTO, seeking legal legitimacy for its retaliation. The EU's targeted tariffs hit politically sensitive U.S. products, pressuring American lawmakers. Beyond tariffs, the EU is deploying regulatory tools, antitrust actions against U.S. tech giants, stricter data privacy enforcement, and climate-based import taxes. The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, for example, taxes carbon-intensive imports, hitting U.S. goods hard. The EU is leveraging its market power to set global standards and forge new trade alliances. Brussels is no longer a passive rule-taker, it's an assertive geopolitical actor. The message to Washington: the EU will defend its interests with every tool available. The future of global trade will not be dictated by the US alone. The trade wars of 2025 mark a turning point, potentially the twilight of American economic leadership. For decades, the US built and anchored a global trading system based on openness and rules. The shift to protectionism has eroded US leverage, pushing allies to seek new alignments and regional trade pacts that exclude America. The US risks becoming just one of several competing blocs, no longer the center of the global economy. Domestically, rising costs and closed export markets are hurting the very industries tariffs were meant to protect. American consumers face higher prices, fueling inflation and political division. The world is moving on, building new trade pathways and alliances. The era of US-led globalization is giving way to fragmentation and competition. Whether this is a permanent decline or a temporary setback remains to be seen. One thing is certain: the world is no longer waiting for America to lead.